Before we understood what lay beyond the edges of the world, mapmakers would mark uncharted realms with terrifying sea creatures and monsters. From this, we get the phrase "Hic sunt dracones," or "Here be dragons." Beyond these warnings lay the dread unknown, where only the bravest explorers ventured forth. The dragons guarded the way to knowledge and discovery, but of course, we can't resist a mystery, and so we set sail to meet them. In all of mythology, in all of the cultures and traditions spanning the history of humanity, there is no single creature more prevalent and powerful than the dragon. It takes on many forms, from the classic Western winged dragon to the giant serpent to the Eastern dragon to more bird-like forms and beyond. Their behaviors and symbolism also differ depending on the tradition, but the dragon has far-reaching influence that has kept it relevant even to the present day. Central to the idea of the dragon is its connection to the forces of nature and to the ideas of change and chaos. Despite our efforts to the contrary, life itself is change and chaos, and the dragon embodies these forces and these mysteries. A study of the dragons of the world can be seen as no less than the study of cultural relationships to nature and life. These insights can be hugely beneficial to a wider understanding of that culture's mythology and beliefs. It can't always be painted with such a broad brush, but understanding the dragon is an opportunity to understand a wide array of cultures, so that's my goal with this series. The dragon is an imposing challenge to study, with millennia of lore requiring context from many cultures, but it guards a rich treasure of wisdom, a wealth of understanding in the mythologies and peoples of the world. So like those sailors who plunged beyond the warning "Hic sunt dracones," we venture into the realm of dragons. Myths of the origins of dragons are as different as they are numerous. Still, many cultures give dragons major roles in the balance of the cosmos, and sometimes in creation itself. But go even further and you find theories about the origin of dragons stretching back eons before humanity walked the earth. In 1977, astronomer and science educator Carl Sagan published a book called The Dragons of Eden. The book deals with the origin of human intelligence, but the metaphor of the dragon features heavily. In the book, Sagan puts forward several theories about the widespread nature of dragon myths. One theory, which has caught some flack in the decades since, is that human beings have a memory of giant reptiles buried deep in our brain, which we inherited from genetic ancestors far predating primates. Carl Jung might place this inherited fear in the collective unconscious, or the innate memories that an entire culture or species shares from birth. In other words, the dragon has lived deep in our minds since the beginning, and we were pre-programmed to fear it. These memories can logically be linked to the dinosaurs, which share many features with dragons. If someone were to dig up a dinosaur skeleton hundreds or thousands of years ago, it's easy to understand how a myth about a giant creature that crosses snakes, eagles, and large cats would arise. In fact, another theory posits that the Western dragon is the embodiment of our primal fears of the three biggest threats to early man: the snake, the eagle or predatory bird, and the large man-eating cat or lion. The Western dragon combines humanity's most feared creatures into one, and when you add in that lizard-brained fear memory of dinosaurs, it makes sense that the dragon would become such a powerful figure in Western myth. In the East, however, the dragon is temperamentally and physically different, being less uniformly evil and taking on a more serpent-like appearance. It is a creature to be revered rather than destroyed. This is why there are far fewer stories about dragon slayers in the East than there are in the West. It's a cultural difference, again, perhaps explained in the way the East and West deal psychologically with natural change and chaos. But most importantly, the snake is almost universally part of the appearance and/or behavior of the dragon, no matter the culture, which suggests that the serpent is at the center of all dragon myth, at the center of our fear and reverence. Even the word dragon comes from the Greek word dracon, meaning serpent, and the word serpent in turn comes from the Proto-Greek word derkomai, which means to see clearly or flash or gleam, which is relevant to some stories where the dragon has an evil or hypnotizing gaze, or even a gleaming jewel in its forehead or throat. So it's possible dragons have been part of our psychology and shared consciousness since before humanity even existed. This primordial power and presence naturally led the dragon to become a staple of creation stories all over the world. Primordial dragons, or dragons representing fundamental cosmic forces, many times from creation myths, exist in mythologies from all over the world, usually in the form of a great serpent. These dragons were essential to the nature of the world, sometimes holding the world together, sometimes threatening all reality, and sometimes both at the same time, which again evokes their association with chaos as part of nature. I'm going to touch lightly on a handful of primordial dragons here, but will likely expand on them in other studies. In Norse tradition, there is the Midgard or world serpent, Jormungandr, abominable child of Loki, who encircles all of the oceans of the world, forming a boundary for Midgard, or our human world. Originally tossed into the sea by Odin, the world serpent grew so large it encircled the oceans and bit its own tail, creating what's known as an Ouroboros, or Ouroboros. The Ouroboros has roots in Egyptian myth, with the first known example being carved into one of the shrines enclosing Tutankhamun's sarcophagus. It symbolizes the eternal cycle of nature, death, and rebirth, while at the same time separating the circle of order inside from the chaos outside. Many early civilizations seem to have the idea of order versus chaos steeped into their myths. Many times, the dragon or serpent has a part in the balance between order and chaos. In keeping with this meaning, the Norse world serpent will cause great chaos when it lets go of its tail, and the Norse end times, Ragnarok, will begin. The order within will be broken, symbolically, and the great final battle of the gods will commence. After Ragnarok, a new world is reborn from the sea, continuing the cycle. We've talked before about the concept of order or ma'at in ancient Egyptian myth, and it's logical that there was an opposite to this idea. Chaos, or Isfet as it was known, was carried out by its embodiment on Earth, a monster who attacked the order of the world on a daily basis, the giant serpent Apep, or Apophis. Apep stood in opposition to order, but more specifically the creature waged a daily battle against the sun god Ra, trying to destroy Ra's sun bark, or boat, as the god sailed through the underworld at night. Since Ra's daily journey was the sun's arc from sunrise to sunset, Apep was trying to end this cycle and plunge the world into permanent darkness and chaos. There it is again, chaos. Storms and eclipses were believed to be temporary victories for Apep, but in the end, Ra and Ma'at were always victorious. Apep is described in one source as an evil dragon, and the coffin text said that during his battles with Ra, Apep could use a hypnotizing stare to attack Ra and anyone else on the barge, reflecting the Proto-Greek dracones to see clearly, flash, or gleam. Egyptian priests would perform daily rituals and sing hymns to help the journey of Ra's barge. In some cases, they specifically worked to ward off the evil eye of Apep. Like Apep, there was a foul dragon in Norse mythology who attacked the order of the cosmos, the corpse eater Níðhöggr, anglicized as Nidhogg. Níðhöggr lay at the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil in a realm called Nástrand, the corpse shore in hell where souls guilty of murder, adultery, and oath-breaking were sent, these being the worst crimes of the Norse people. Níðhöggr was constantly gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil, and there are disputing theories as to the meaning of this. It was either trapped in the roots and trying to get free, or it was attacking the roots directly, thereby attacking all life and creation, which the world tree represented and supported. Either way, he was a creature of decay and chaos who constantly threatened the entire cosmos, just like Apep. Finally, we come to the serpent most familiar to Western traditions, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, often interpreted as Satan or the devil. However, our modern idea of the devil as an adversary to God, a fallen angel, etc., came about much later, so the serpent in the Garden of Eden was not originally intended to represent the devil. After Eve gives in to the temptations of the serpent and eats the fruit of the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the consequences affect every human being since. However, the serpent itself was also cursed by God to crawl on its belly from that day forth. From this, we can extrapolate that it did not crawl on its belly while in the garden. The serpent is often shown in Christian art as a snake, but there are depictions of it with a more dragon-like appearance. Since the serpent in the Garden of Eden has come to be associated with the devil, it's worth mentioning that Satan is often depicted as a dragon-like creature, and in the book of Revelations he is referred to as the Great Red Dragon. From a cosmological or etiological sense, etiological just means having to do with how things came to be the way they are. The serpent of the Garden of Eden is responsible for both enlightenment, gaining knowledge, and suffering. The knowledge makes Adam and Eve ashamed of their nakedness. They are cursed to endure hardship and pain, etc. Perhaps the story is suggesting that they are in many ways intertwined, at least compared to the blissful ignorance of the garden. There are, of course, many more primordial dragons representing fundamental forces of nature, change, and chaos. Dragons like the biblical Leviathan, Tiamat from Mesopotamian myth, or the cosmic serpent of the Indian multiverse, Mukalinda, among others. We'll probably come back to them in later studies, but this small sampling shows that the dragon, even in its most streamlined form, that of the serpent, has had a lasting and powerful influence over the mythologies of the world. To quote Joseph Campbell, mythology can often be seen as other people's religion, and so these myths and stories were as important to the Norse and the Egyptians as the story of the Garden of Eden is to Christians today. But the shadow of the dragon is still longer and deeper, and in our next study we'll investigate European dragons and the dragon slayers.